Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in because, well, so many of us have this incredibly complicated relationship with our mornings, right? We hop online and see all these internet gurus boasting about waking up at 4 a.m., taking freezing ice baths, and somehow reading a whole book before sunrise. It breeds this kind of toxic productivity myth that literally makes us feel guilty before we've even had a sip of coffee. But what if we completely dismantled that idea? Today, we're looking at a super practical framework from Ahmad Crash Course on the Healthy Morning Routine. We are going to strip away the guilt, forget about those imaginary ideal versions of ourselves, and introduce a completely guilt-free mechanical approach to starting your day. Okay, so what on earth do your mornings have in common with a power outage in Karachi? Well, think about those first few minutes right after the power cuts out. Everything feels totally unstable. The lights, the fans, the routines around you all suddenly depend on whatever happens next, and you're just kind of waiting for the backup system to settle down. A morning routine works exactly the same way. Your morning is not just the first part of your day, it sets the actual conditions for the day. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to reduce that early uncertainty so the rest of your day has a steady foundation to build on well before the day's typical stress and distractions drain your energy. And that brings us to a hidden rule that pretty much flips everything you've probably been taught on its head. Here it is. A healthy morning routine lowers resistance to the next good action. See, a successful morning routine is not a test of your willpower. It's really not. It's not some fixed personality trait where some people are just naturally disciplined and the rest of us aren't. It is simply a mechanical system designed to lower your starting resistance to making good choices. Basically, if a habit makes your next step easier, it absolutely belongs in your routine. But if it creates friction, ditch it. It doesn't belong. All right, moving into Section 1, the 3 core jobs. Let's look at what routines must actually do. It all boils down to 3 core jobs. Step 1, wake up. Step 2, stabilize. Step 3, direct. That is the whole system right there. Think of it exactly like starting a car. First, the engine actually has to physically turn on. Then it has to settle into a steady, reliable idle. Only after that can you put it in gear and drive somewhere useful. It's not just about cramming in random productive-sounding activities. It's about purposefully transitioning your mind and body from sleep mode into useful mode. So let's look a bit closer at that first step. Wake up. This simply means crossing the physical threshold from sleep mode into useful mode. Now, I know this sounds incredibly obvious, but so many routines fail right here. Why? Because they ask for way too much before the body has actually crossed that threshold. If you try to think deeply, make big life decisions, or force intense discipline while you're still totally groggy, you're asking a half-awake system to behave like a fully powered one. And guess what? It's going to crash. A morning routine shouldn't begin by demanding clarity, it needs to begin by creating that clarity. Which leads us perfectly to the next 2 jobs: stabilize and direct. Once you're awake, you usually have this mental fog, maybe rushing thoughts about work or just general sleep inertia. Your job here is to stabilize, which lowers all that inner mental noise. Imagine a crowded city street before the traffic lights have synchronized. Everything is moving, but nothing is moving smoothly. A stabilizing routine acts like synchronized traffic lights to create rhythm instead of chaos. Then you have to direct. You need to give the day a clear target. A great analogy here is a ceiling fan. Spinning super fast isn't enough. The fan only matters because it is pointed somewhere useful, changing the feel of the room. Your routine needs to point you in a specific direction, even if it's just telling your brain, hey, we're starting with focus today, or we're starting with calm. This brings us to a beautiful, much-needed redefinition. A morning routine is not a performance. It's not a personality test or some daily proof that you are a highly disciplined warrior. Believing those ideas actually makes your routines fragile. A true morning routine is simply a repeatable way to move from sleep into purposeful action. When we strip away all that unnecessary pressure, it allows us to genuinely see our routine as a helpful support system, rather than a daily exam we have to constantly pass. Let's jump to Section 2, designing for real life. This is all about building a routine that actually lasts. You know what the biggest mistake we make is? Designing our routines for our imaginary ideal self. You know, that superhero version of you who always sleeps 8 solid hours, wakes up bursting with motivation, and never ever hits the snooze button. But actually, let's be honest, that version of you basically doesn't exist on a typical Tuesday. We need to design for the typical Tuesday self. This is the you who wakes up kind of foggy, maybe a little stressed, and carrying mental noise from yesterday. A truly sticky routine respects the truth that your mornings fluctuate. It works across those different states because it demands a reliable entry point, not daily perfection. So let's look at how the actual size of your routine impacts your success. A routine has to fit the real capacity of your morning. If your routine is way too ambitious, it's going to feel like a test you keep failing. So naturally, you just start avoiding it entirely. If it's too vague, well, then it's just a nice idea with no real shape, and you'll end up drifting. If it's too rigid, it becomes a strict rule you deeply resent, and trust me, you will eventually break it. But if it is well-sized for your actual available time and energy, it feels like a stable path. And what happens when a path is stable? You repeat it. It feels usable, not just admirable. In the real world, routines typically break down for 4 main reasons. First, it depends on your mood, which kind of makes it a mood-based event, not a reliable routine. Second, it requires a perfect, uninterrupted 90-minute window, meaning just one minor disruption knocks the whole thing out. Third, it demands intense discipline and constant inner self-talk, which literally exhausts you before the day even begins. And fourth, it silently enforces the wrong identity, making you pretend to be this highly regimented person when your real mornings actually feel totally different. To really ground this idea, the source text gives us the Pakistani household test. Imagine a guy named Ahmad waking up in a shared, noisy home in Karachi. Bathroom time is highly limited, family conversations are already happening all around him, and the pace is fast. A pristine 2-hour social media perfect routine? No way. It will collapse here immediately. But what about a routine that involves just getting out of bed promptly, drinking a glass of water, washing up, and spending exactly 2 quiet minutes planning the very first task of the day? That survives. A strong routine isn't about doing the absolute most. It's about doing what can actually survive your specific setting. All right, bringing us to section 3, making it stick. Let's talk about how to build routines that basically run on autopilot. I absolutely love this takeaway. A routine is infinitely stronger when the very first step is almost embarrassingly simple. Your body and brain in the morning are kind of like a heavy bus parked at a bus stop. Getting that massive bus moving takes significantly more effort and fuel than keeping it moving once it's finally rolling. If your first step is hard, the entire routine is going to feel incredibly heavy. So your goal isn't some dramatic, impressive start. Your goal is to make starting less expensive. You want to lower that starting resistance so much that you literally can't say no. And here is how that flows chronologically into a sticky habit. We call it the routine loop. Minute 1 begins with a cue. Now, this could be opening the blinds to let light through the window or just splashing water on your face. This reduces ambiguity and clearly signals the start. That leads directly to minute 2, the action, which is your small, easily repeatable behavior. And by minute 10, you hit the payoff. You feel clearer, steadier, and way more ready for the day. That payoff is absolutely crucial because it teaches your brain that the loop was actually worth doing. When the cue reliably leads to the action, and the action provides a steady payoff, the whole routine becomes beautifully automatic. Which brings us to our final, and honestly perhaps most provocative thought of the day. Stop asking whether a routine is impressive, start asking whether it is repeatable. What you should really take away from this is that your mornings are not a performance for anyone else on the internet. They are a deeply personal support system for you. When you finally stop chasing the fantasy of a perfect, exhausting routine, you can start building one that works quietly and reliably for your real life. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. What embarrassingly simple step can you take tomorrow morning to start lowering your starting resistance?